Welcome to Sunday Sermons from the Williamsburg Community Chapel, brought to you by the Chapel Podcast Network. Let's grab our Bibles and open up to the book of Genesis. We're going to be in chapter 11, verse 27 through chapter 12, verse 9. And I'll read chapter 12, verses 1 through 3 for us now, as we prepare to hear from lead pastor Travis Simone as he helps us continue in our sermon series titled The Causes of Exile. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed."
I just started my second semester of seminary when Nina and I found out we were pregnant with our first daughter. It was a moment of great joy. It also introduced a lot of uncertainty into our lives. Trying to scramble for some certainty, I did what many dads would do in that moment. What's the bank account look like? I went online and I checked. I had $10 to my name. Seriously, $10. I think I had just made a tuition payment, again, for the second semester. And seminary is a 6-semester deal. And I thought, how am I going to get through this? How are we going to get through this? Am I going to have to quit? Am I going to have to go part-time? I better find a job that allows me to do this and make some money to provide for my family. So I started smiling and dialing, as they say. And I kept running into trouble because I went to a Methodist seminary and I would call these Methodist churches and they would say, "Well, why aren't you a Methodist?" And then I would call the non-denominational churches that like the ones I grew up in, and they would say, "Why are you at a Methodist seminary?" And I felt like I was at the end of myself. Nina said she knew that I loved her when she heard me on the phone say, "Well, I've never directed a youth choir before, but I'm sure that's something I could figure out." Again, I felt like I was at the end of myself. Nina called her best friend, Aaron. I told you a story about Aaron a few weeks ago, the one with the triplets. She said to Aaron on that phone call, "If only God would tell us what to do." It's the cry of many a person when they find themselves at the end of themselves. If only God would tell us what to do. At the end of Genesis 11, what you read here is humanity is at the end of itself. After the Tower of Babel incident, when humanity is scattered across the face of the earth, you hear about this man named Abram who will become Abraham, and he has a dead brother, a dead father, an orphaned nephew, and a barren wife. And barrenness in the Bible is a metaphor for hopelessness. Abraham and humanity here is at the end of itself. And I can hear Abraham just crying out now, "God, if you would only tell me what to do." Be careful what you ask God for. Because in verse 1 of chapter 12, God does tell Abraham what to do. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you." Go from your country, leave your home. But wait, Lord, I'm in crisis here. Did you not know? Dead father, dead brother, orphaned nephew. I can't go. I got to hunker down. I've got to get a better job. I've got to make sure I provide for all these people that I'm here stuck with. And God says, "Go." See, God called Abraham into exile. That's the call of God on his life. God called Abraham into exile. I love the way the King James translation puts it. It's so stark and to the point. King James of Genesis 12:1 reads like this: "Get thee out. Get thee out." And it's interesting because the Hebrew word for go or get, as the King James translates it, the Hebrew word is the word walk. God looks at Abraham in his situation of barrenness, of hopelessness, of distress, and God says, Abraham, start walking. What a startling call for Abraham to receive. Can you imagine how that rattled him? But Galatians 3:7 makes it clear that the call into exile is not only for Abraham. Galatians 3:7 says this: "Know then that it is those of faith who are the sons of Abraham." For anyone here who has placed their faith in Jesus Christ, I want to be exceedingly clear this morning. God called Abraham into exile, and God calls you into exile. Perhaps you have some questions about this calling. I bet Abraham had some questions too. Will it be costly to answer God's call into exile? Will it be a costly call? Look at verse 1 on your song sheets. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you." Notice the increasing value of what Abraham is asked to leave behind. He's first asked to leave behind his country. Okay, difficult, but I suppose there are other countries out there. Abraham thought perhaps, I like this country, I'm comfortable here, but there are other countries. I can leave the country. Next says, go from your kindred. That's go from your family. A little more difficult. You can replace a country, but you cannot replace a family. But if anyone's ever had Thanksgiving dinner with their family, I'm sure there are some people you wouldn't mind leaving behind. So the kindred is a word for the extended family. Yeah, I can leave that uncle behind. I can do without that commentary on my life at the Thanksgiving table, sure. But then God says, not just go from your country, not just go from your kindred, but go from your father's house. That's your inner circle. That's your, what we might call today, your nuclear family. And in Abraham's day, it also meant the wealth that his father had built up over time, the inheritance that his dad had left for him. Will it be costly? Yes. Yes, it will be costly. Well, if it's going to cost, perhaps, God, it will be clear. Will you make it clear for me, God? Well, look at verse 1 again. Still in verse 1 of our passage. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you. This is the detail that I missed reading this story since I was a kid. God does not say go to Canaan. God does not say go to the promised land. God says go to the land I will show you. The book of Hebrews, commenting on this scene in Genesis 12, puts great emphasis on this point, the unknown destination of Abraham's call into exile. Here are these words from Hebrews 11:8. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Will it be costly? Yes. Will it be clear? No. Well, if it's going to be costly and it's not going to be clear, at least, God, will it be comfortable? Perhaps you could add some cushion to this difficult journey you are sending on. Look at verses 4-7 on your song sheet. So Abraham went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran, and Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and all the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. Well, Abraham sure tries to make it comfortable. Notice he takes all of his possessions. Notice he takes all of the servants that they had acquired there in Haran. And Abraham may also be trying to make it a little less costly by taking an additional family member with him. Notice that he takes the orphaned nephew, Lot, with him. In verse 4, it says, so Abraham went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. The interesting thing about this is the Hebrew word translated and here can also be translated but. It appears that Abraham is hedging his bet quite significantly, trying to make his trip a bit more comfortable. Read the verse translating the word but. So Abraham went as the Lord had told him, but Lot went with him. And so it looks at Abraham entering the land of Canaan, trying to make his costly and unclear journey at least as comfortable as possible. So take note of what's in the land when Abraham arrives. Verse 6, the second half there. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring, I will give this land. Notice Canaanites are in the land, and God says, Abraham, I'm going to give you this land. See, no matter how comfortable Abraham tries to make it for himself, God reminds him, don't forget, Abraham, there are Canaanites in this land. Will it be comfortable? No. Will it be clear? No. Will it be costly? Yes. And yet, God called Abraham into exile. And I have two questions about this. First, why does God call Abraham into exile? Why send someone on a costly, unclear, and uncomfortable journey? And then my second question is, why does Abraham go? Why does he even attempt this act of faith? If it will be costly and it won't be clear and it won't be comfortable, why God and why go? The answer is in verses 2 and 3. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of earth shall be blessed. Now, you don't have to be a biblical scholar to see the key theme of this passage. The word blessing is repeated 5 times in these 2 verses. In fact, blessing was God's original intention for humanity. It's the first thing God does with the first human beings in Genesis 1:28. And God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. Now, blessing is one of those words in our day and in our culture and our language where it gets used so much it almost doesn't mean anything anymore. But in the Bible, it has a very specific meaning. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply. Blessing is the multiplication of God's life. That's what blessing is in the Bible. Blessing is the multiplication of God's life in the world. And yet, those first human beings, instead of multiplying God's life, they wanted life on their own terms, according to their own wisdom. The result was exile. and we were cast out from God's presence. We lost our true home. Now take note of this. The word blessing is used 5 times from Genesis chapter 1 to Genesis chapter 11. And then it's used 5 times right here in Genesis 12, verses 2 and 3. 5 times, 1 through 11, 5 times in 12, verses 2 and 3. What that means is God is determined. God is doggedly determined to restore the blessing to humanity. Think I'm making too much of 5 blessings in 1 through 11, 5 blessings here? Remember the trick we learned about Hebrew literature, how you know the core theme last week. Remember, in Hebrew literature, the core theme is often placed in the very center of the passage, like a treasure that the reader is supposed to find. In verses 2 and 3, God makes 7 statements to Abraham. And I will make of you a great nation. 1, I will bless you. 2, I will make your name great. 3, so that you will be a blessing. 4, I will bless those who bless you. 5, and him who dishonors you. 6, and him who dishonors you I will curse. 6, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. 7. So the core theme, 7 statements of God. The core theme comes in statement number 4. 3 before, 3 after. Statement 4 is the treasure God wants you to go looking for, to mine for it. And what's the 4th statement? You will be a blessing. And in Hebrew, it's actually a command. Be a blessing, Abraham. So here's God's shocking plan. Please hear me. This is difficult to explain. I'm going to try to do it. God's shocking plan. To bless mankind in exile, God gives his life-multiplying blessing to a man and calls him into exile. That's the plan of God. I'll say it again a little differently. Exile is both the punishment for our disobedience and God's plan to save us from our disobedience. And so it's a fair question, if that's God's plan, to ask, did it work? If that was the plan, did it work? We'll go to Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, and you'll read this. The book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. That Abraham was called to bring God's blessing into exile, and Jesus Christ is the ultimate descendant of Abraham. And in and as Jesus Christ, God enters our exile. Jesus left his country. Jesus left his father's house. He carried the blessing, the multiplication of God's life, to a wedding at Cana of Galilee, where they had run out of wine, and he let the party start again. He carried God's blessing to a desert place where people were hungry and without food, and he turned 5 loaves and 2 fish into a feast for 5,000 with leftovers on end. Most importantly, he carried the blessing, the multiplication of God's life, to the tomb of Lazarus and to the house of Jairus, where his daughter lay dead. It was costly for Jesus to heed God's call into exile. Surely it was uncomfortable. And as darkness descended on the cross, the outcome was anything but clear. But the darkness of death was no match for the light of the world. See, the resurrection of Jesus Christ is the ultimate multiplication of God's life. And now the blessing is available to all who place their faith and trust in him. And here's the final twist. There's one more twist in this grand story. After his resurrection, Jesus looks at his disciples and says this, Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Jesus looks at his followers and says, I'm calling you into exile. Get out of here. Go make disciples of all nations. And that Greek word, the Greek words for all nations, pan-ethne, which in the old Greek translation of the Old Testament is exactly what God says to Abraham in Genesis 12:3. You are going to be a blessing to pan-ethne, all the families, all the ethnic groups of the world. Jesus says, go be a blessing to all nations, all people, all ethnic groups. Just as God said to Abraham, you're going to be a blessing to all nations, all families, all ethnic groups. Jesus is bringing you back to that call to Abraham as he calls you into exile. See, exile is still God's plan to bring blessing to people living in exile. This is why Jesus' command is to make disciples. What better way could there possibly be to multiply God's life in the world than to make more followers of Jesus? For Jesus was the ultimate embodiment of God's blessing. So when people follow him, the blessing gets multiplied. When Nina was on the phone with her friend Aaron, crying out, if only God would tell us what to do. Aaron, in her wisdom, shot back. He's not going to tell you what to do. He wants you to trust him. When you find yourself at the end of yourself in life, the answer is to trust him as God sends you out into exile. And so as an act of trust this week, will you consider your answers to these questions? Where is God calling you to carry the blessing? What dead ends of our world is God calling you to start walking toward? What country, kindred, and father's house is God asking you to leave? Will it be costly? Yes. Will it be clear? No. Will it be comfortable? No. But God called Abraham into exile. And God now calls you into exile.
Thank you for joining us today. Here at the Williamsburg Community Chapel, we are all about making disciples of Jesus Christ. So wherever you are on your spiritual journey, we hope you will join us this year as we study the biblical theme of exile and learn how to sing the Lord's song in a foreign land.